So when Joe put out this email, I kind of got excited about it because when I got my technician license, I was already living in an HOA, and I already knew that there was no possibility of putting antennas up. So being the mechanical guy I am, I'm a welder, fabricator, build cars, hot rods and stuff. I've always done stuff with my hands. So I just took it as a challenge. I knew I wasn't going to be able to build the most efficient antennas, but at the time, being a technician, UHF, VHF, my priority is just being able to hit the repeater from Severance at the time. And it was a little difficult being in the house with just an HT, so my goal became to build an effective antenna that would let me get on the air and not sound like I was frying bacon. Hidden in plain sight was the other goal, just being in the HOA, so I had to build something that was effective but not be seen. My backyard, if any of you are familiar with Severance, the Great Western Trail runs through Severance. There's those large power lines right there too. My backyard ended at the fence. There was a sidewalk and the power lines and the Great Western Trail. So my backyard was visible to everybody walking through there. Once I got a general, moving up to HF, I didn't have a lot of room, and I knew I wasn't going to be able to put up a full-size HF antenna, especially on 40 meters. I eventually did get something, but again, it was one of those things I just wanted to experiment and see what I could do. But I wanted to try to build something that I didn't necessarily need, you know, like a tuner, automatic tuner for. Like I say, being the hands-on guy, I wanted to have fun with it and just try different things and see what I could make work. If it didn't work, part it out and use it for something else. And of course, have fun with it. So the very first one I did, I think every ham has probably built one of these. If not, they probably should. Just the very simple quarter wave ground plane. This was a 70 centimeter antenna. What I did with this one, it's just an SO239 connector with some ring terminals that I crimped on for the radials. To mount it, I mounted it up in my garage at the time. I just ran the coax through a piece of 3/4 inch PVC, connected it to the SO239 connector, and then just let the weight of the coax hold the antenna to the top of the PVC. Then I was able to attach the PVC to the rafters. So I made one for 70 centimeters, one for 2 meters. This is probably one of the most simple things anyone can put together, can go up in the attic, and they work very well. So I know this is one that Joe gets excited about every time I talk about it, so I brought it for him. This is it's a full wavelength loop for 2 meters, folded up in kind of a 3-dimensional pattern. This is not my idea. It's one I found online. And of course, as soon as I saw it, it's like, yeah, I got to build that. It's adjusted here at the ends, these two pieces. You adjust them, lengthen them or shorten them to get it to resonate on the frequency you want. So this one's built for 2 meters, and of course, by way of harmonics, it also works great on 70 centimeters. The paint, just happened to find the exact color spray paint at Home Depot as what we had just stained our deck with. So this is up on a 2nd story deck. It's up about 13 feet. This little wicker table I had up there, I just sat it on there, and even down in the backyard from the grass, you couldn't see it. I mean, you lost it in the deck rails. This is the one I'm using right now at home. Excuse me. Normally it's just sitting on a little table in my shack, or not on a table, on a bookshelf, and I have it hooked up to my 50-watt mobile. And I love this little antenna. It's just one of those kind of cool looking things. Mm-hmm. Right here. So in between, at the feed point there, that's a little piece of plastic CPVC. The CPVC is the same size as copper. So yeah, it just slides right down in there. So the next one, and I brought this one also, I'm just going to pick it up here so everyone can see it because it blends in so good. I did such a good job of making it disappear. This is my 2-meter dipole. It's just like brazing rod that you can get from Harbor Freight, I think is where I got this. Get it out of the way of the presentation. So I had this one mounted on the back side of the deck stairs, up about as high as I could get it to where the top wire wouldn't hit the bottom of the deck. And it worked fine just like it was. If it didn't, I could just, the clamps I had it screwed onto the 4x4, I could just rotate the thing out away from the stairs if I needed to, but most of the time I didn't need to. I'm looking forward to using this one again because I just picked up, or yesterday I had delivered FT991A. So I'm kind of excited to try some 2-meter sideband. So the thing about this one, if I just rotate it, now I've got horizontal polarization for 2-meter sideband. So to try this one on 2-meter sideband and digital, this one's going to come back into use here pretty soon. Too much stuff. All right, so a lot of you guys are probably familiar with this one. This is made by a company called Arrow. It's the open stub J-pole, and it's a true dual band. I believe there's the 2-meter stub, 70-centimeter stub, and I think that's a 5/8 tuning stub, if I remember correctly. I'm not sure anybody really knows how these work, because I sure don't. But I found the instructions online. Of course, I wanted to build one. I just clamped it to the deck pole just to try it out, and later on I painted it. So I still have it, and it may go up on top of the house now that I live in a place that doesn't have an HOA. But again, it's just one of those, you could paint it, or if you got a tree or something that you're able to hide it. The antenna itself worked very well. So slot dish, this isn't my picture, but I found this PDF online. John Portune, W6NBC, I believe is his call sign. He's got a lot of really cool antennas. If you just search his name or call sign, you'll find a ton of PDFs where he's built some really cool things. The idea here was with the slot, and I honestly don't know all the theory behind it, but a slot cut horizontally in a piece of metal will radiate vertically, and vice versa. The slot that is vertical will radiate horizontally. Again, I don't know all the theory behind it, but it was one of those, yeah, I got to try to build one of these. This slot is for 2 meters, and I believe it's a half wavelength long. And because that length, 38 inches, I think, something like that, wouldn't fit on the dish completely, that's why the ends drop down. So, uh-oh, you advance me. So I had a piece of sheet metal I'd been tripping over in the shop, and I thought, well, I could probably fit a 70-centimeter half wavelength long slot on it. So mine had to droop over the ends just the same. But I was able to, and this is it. I just made a piece of wood with a couple little pieces of wood to kind of trap it. Where the feed point is, you want to go ahead and advance to the next one? Where the feed point is, the way I found the 50 ohm spot to put my wires is I had these little tiny magnets that had studs on them. So I put the ring connectors on the coax and just kind of slid it back and forth along the slot till I found that 50 ohm point. And for the longest time over in Severance, I had this, I painted it white, and then I just set it in the windowsill by my chair and had it hooked up to the HT. It's just another one of those. It's probably not the most effective, but it got me into the repeater, and I played with it out in none, and it still works really well. This one, I was out in Pawnee grassland. This is after I had neck surgery, so that's where a lot of these came from. I had neck surgery. I wasn't doing a whole lot, so I got really bored. Made a lot of these. That bottom one there, I was out in Pawnee grassland. I was out there with a buddy of mine. He was doing some target shooting. I was just out there hanging out. So I brought that little antenna and my HT and made a few contacts out there on 5 watts from Pawnee with that. So this one, I did dig this up as well. This also works on kind of the same idea as the slot antenna. There are some commercial varieties of these made, and the idea is the coax runs on the inside. You can paint these kind of a semi-gloss or semi-flat white and slide them over a vent pipe on your house and mount them up that way. This one is 2 meters. I think it also works on 70 centimeters as well. In fact, yes, it has, because I've used this antenna before. Again, it was just one of those from John Portune, W6NBC, that I found his design online. But if this is painted white and the coax is on the inside and you have it running down a vent pipe somewhere inside, no one would ever know that's an antenna. And the great thing about that one is you can get the height being up on the roof of your house. Next. So this little 70 centimeter Moxon, a directional antenna. This one is just like it looks. It's copper tape on a piece of cardboard off the back of a notepad. Again, it was one of those, I'd been reading up on the Moxons, and I had the copper tape for another project I was working on. I thought, I'm going to try this. So kind of hard to see in the picture, but the design of the Moxon, this is the driven element, this is the reflector. There's a split in the tape right here, and there's a split here at the feed point. To adjust for resonance, you adjust the gap in between the driven element and the reflector. And I kept this one in my office in North Fort Collins for quite a while. I eventually zip tied a piece of wooden dowel rod on there, so I had something to hold it, and I clamped it up to the bookcase at work. And sure enough, if I pointed up at Horsetooth, the repeater was fine, and as I got about to 90 degrees, the repeater would get real scratchy. So the directionality of it is definitely there. And I think I've run 10 watts through that on one of my little mobile radios, and it handled 10 watts no problem. I was expecting it to go up in flames, just kind of burst, but never did. So this one, the Fong roll-up J-pole. I'm sure everyone's familiar with the roll-up J-pole using the 300 ohm twin lead TV cable. The way Mr. Fong designs his, they're a little shorter than normal, and they're meant to be housed in the PVC. This is not Schedule 40, it's the 120 PSI, 3/4 inch PVC, so it's thinner. The PVC pipe is thinner, so it doesn't affect the antenna's performance as much. These on their own, as it sits right there, yeah, they kind of scream antenna. But what I did with mine, oops, oh, hopefully, there it is. So what I did with mine is I went to the dollar store and got a cheap plastic flower pot. And in the base of it, I think we had some 10-pound weights from the gym. We had a few extras, so I snagged one of those to put in the bottom to keep it from tipping over. Mounted this in the flower pot. I found some garland and some flowers at the dollar store that didn't have any metal in them. And I made me a flower. And yeah, there we are. I kind of painted it up, my custom camouflage paint, so it wasn't white and bright in the middle with all the flowers. That might have stood out, but yeah, I don't think anybody would have noticed this was an antenna. And these things actually work really, really well. I was really surprised at how well they work, and they're really easy to make. You can find the instructions online for these things, and any piece of 300 ohm twin lead in a few minutes time, you can make one of these pretty easy. But I had fun with that one, and there's my folded loop sitting next to it on the left picture there. So this was a last minute addition. I was just telling Jim about this one. I'd done this once before, but what this is, it's 2 strips of that copper adhesive tape and a BNC to binding post or banana plug adapter. And I cut a couple pieces to, basically it's a 70 centimeter dipole. So I cut them, and those are stuck to the window of my kitchen, and I did this last night. Will this have sound? It plays a video? No? Oh, bummer. Okay. Oh, hopefully. The next slide is a video. I thought, yeah, just by chance, if nothing else, you could hear how it is to the repeater. This is from my home in Nunn. I'm 25 miles away, straight line to the repeater, to the 275 machine. So the next slide is a video, and see if we can get this to work. I just got lucky. I don't think it's going to do it, is it? Okay. Okay. At any rate, I threw my call sign out and asked for a signal check, and WS7M, I believe it was, came back to me. Said my audio was a little low, but I was clear, so I got up to the mic a little bit more, and he goes, yeah, it sounds great. And it was just one of those off-chance things. I was recording just in case somebody answered, and they did, but it was crystal clear. And it's as simple as some copper tape that I taped up to the window and cut the legs the correct length for the repeater's frequency, and it worked fine. Go to the next one after the video, I guess. Oh, yeah. So then I got my general. It was on HF. And the first antenna I made, it wasn't the most stealthy, but it was very hard to see. I just made a real simple fan dipole for 20 meters and 40 meters. This is up at the top north corner of my deck, which is right at 13 feet from where this is. It's not a one-to-one balun. It's just a very simple feed point connector I made with the BNC going to each leg there. And then I had wires for 20 meters and 40 meters. You can go to the next one. So what I did is to each side of the fence, you can see there's the 20-meter leg. It ran to this fence post. 40-meter leg ran to this fence post. The same over here, 20-meter legs to that post, 40-meter legs to that post. And again, this was, as soon as I got my General, I had a FT818, so whole whopping 6 watts on a battery. And my very first contact on that antenna and that radio was Pavel, and I can't think of his call sign, but some of you guys have probably talked to him in Brazil. PV8AL, I think, is his call sign. So 5 watts on this little fan dipole. My first HF contact was in Brazil. And I used this antenna for quite a while until I started researching other HF antenna avenues. This was one, again, I saw online. I thought, hey, this is a pretty cool idea. This is a snap line housing, chalk line housing. Bought it new, so there was no chalk in it. Pulled all the string out and filled it up with 24 gauge polystealth wire. And I think I was able to get about 60 feet of wire in it. If any of you are familiar with the end-fed random wire antenna, the random wire, there's actually some very specific lengths to use that don't resonate or that are not falling on the harmonics of any amateur radio bands. And some of those are 29 feet, 35.5 feet, 41 feet, and 58 feet. Well, I had 60 feet of wire in here, so what I did is I notched off the plastic 2 feet short of all those lengths. Next one. And I did that because you can see the little red wire over here is a 2-foot jumper. This little box here is a 9-to-1 Anten that I made, impedance transformer. So once I clipped that jumper on there, then I had those exact lengths wherever I pulled it out. I could set this up as a vertical, a sloper, an inverted V. This is a sloper off my deck. This is one of those that you can set up when you want to use it, take it down when you don't. If you like to do portable stuff, this is something you can string up in a tree or up a fishing pole, crappie pole, fiberglass mast or whatever. So here I just had it set up as a sloper in my backyard, I think about the 35.5 feet. I do run a counterpoise. I think I had a 16-foot wire that I was running for a counterpoise. As so the coax wasn't being used as a counterpoise. And this does require a tuner though. That 9-to-1 transformer brings the impedance down to where most like internal tuners of a radio with a 3-to-1 range will find a match pretty easily. But this is one, again, you can set up and take down pretty easy. This one's kind of hard to see. Excuse me. This is underneath my deck. Here's the center feed. There's a wire going this way and a wire going this way. This was my 6-meter dipole, wire dipole. And just to try to keep it simple, at the ends of the wires, I had some 95-pound paracord, the real thin paracord, just taped to the end of the wires, and a couple feet of that going to a screw. So, and that center connector, again, it's not a balun. It's just from an SO239 straight to each leg. This was great. I had worked some sideband contacts on this antenna, not too far away, but more regional, if anything. But I have digital contacts on this one too. So if you want to go ahead and go to the next one. I then found the end-fed half-wave antenna, and this is the one that really got me excited for HF. What I did is the transformer is the little black box here on the fence. It ran up to the center of the edge of the deck. That's about 13 feet, and then back over to the other side of the fence. So if you're not familiar with the 40-meter or the end-fed half-wave antenna, the wire is a half wavelength on the fundamental frequency. So this one was 40 meters, and I had it tuned for about the middle of the 40-meter band. By way of harmonics, it also works on 20, 15, and 10 meters. The end-fed half wave will work on all odd and even harmonics. Well, for 40 meters, that's 20, 15, and 10. If this wire would have been cut for half wavelength on 80 meters, there'd be several more bands that would come into play as well. But with this antenna, no tuner needed. There is some tricks in building the transformer to allow it to work on 10 meters. As you know, harmonics aren't exact. It's not 7, then 14, then 28, and so on. They kind of increase as you go. So there are some tricks to tune these, but info's available online. It's real easy to find and make. A lot of places sell these. I know Jim makes a kit that he sells Really slick little kit that's really cool for portable use too. It has the transformer built into the wire winder. With an external tuner, I have an FMJ 993B or 933B. Very wide range tuner. I could tune everything from 160 to 6. I've made contacts on this on 160 on digital and CW. 80 meters, it worked really well. It's a little noisy, but I've got sideband DX on 80 meters with this antenna. And like I say, with that wide range tuner, I could get everything from 160 to 6. So this kind of became my main antenna. I used 26 gauge polystealth, and it's, if you guys are familiar with that, it's kind of a dull black insulation on it. There's some mornings, this was the kitchen window right here. I can't tell you the number of mornings I'm standing there making my copy going, oh crap, did my antenna come down? Because you just couldn't see it. It disappeared. And back here where I was taking this picture, it's just invisible. It disappears. So. This is the transformer mounted on the fence to the south. Go ahead and click it one more time. So with this antenna up at the deck, where I just had a little hook that screws in, one of those little metal hooks, and I had it peeled open a little bit because I woke up one morning the first winter after I had this antenna up, and you can see my wires, it's hanging pretty low and full of ice, so I just made that hook where I could unhook it and just drop it and let it fall down on the ground. On the other end of the wire, instead of being, you know, attached hard to the fence, I had a short piece of paracord going to a spring into another eye hook that I had screwed in the fence. So when the wind blew, there was a little give to it. Fortunately, with the spring on it, when I woke up and found it that morning, it hadn't snapped. And that polystealth, I think, is copper-clad steel anyways. But yeah, I just made it to where I could take it down so there's no damage. Yes?
Vendor for the polystealth?
Several places sell it. Wireman, yeah, he asked for a vendor for the polystealth. And I think most, I believe like DX Engineering sells it. I think HRO sells it. Wireman, I know, is one that he has a coax and wires and stuff like that. I think pretty much any place that deals with amateur radio is going to sell that wire because it's pretty popular for wire antennas. So this being the 40 meter wire, I wanted to try to get 80 meters on it. And this was my first attempt at 80 meters. And this coil goes at the very end of the wire. It's, I don't remember the number of turns or the wire size, and unfortunately I should have looked up the specs. But the coil is built to measure 110 microhenries. And it has a stub on the end of it, which is the right-hand side, start out about 3 feet. With this coil on, you get very, very narrow bandwidth. So you kind of tune it for the area of 80 meters or 75 that you want to operate on. I kind of enjoy listening to those guys at night. They do the trivia on 3916, so I tuned it to that range. But if you want to go to the next picture, that stuck out pretty good being red, so I kind of painted it black, but still there's this black thing that looked like it was just kind of hanging in space in my backyard. So all of a sudden my stealth antenna became pretty obvious. It works. You can use that section. I think I had maybe 20 hertz of bandwidth. It was pretty tight. But realizing that I could get all of 80 meters with my automatic tuner, I took this off and just used the tuner to get 80 meters. So anyone familiar with the Wolf River Coils portable antenna? Okay. I had one. There was some things that I didn't like about it. It's not that it's a bad antenna. I'm just, me being me, I'm like, I kind of have my own ideas of what I want as a loading coil for portable use. So I put this design together. I've got a PDF made. If anybody wants it, I'll be happy to send it to you. My email address is on QRZ. You can send me an email and I'll send it to you. It costs about 25 bucks to build this coil. And the three of them I've got there, the one on the far left with a 9.5 foot whip, I can tune down to 80 meters. The one in the middle tunes down to 60 meters, and the one on the right will tune down to 40 meters, all with this 9.5 foot whip. On the right there, I'm a Parks on the Air guy. I love doing Parks on the Air. Pawnee and Lori and Boyd Lake is kind of my go-tos around here. This is the setup I normally use when I do Parks on the Air. This is the tripod, little tripod that come with the Wolf River coil antenna. It's just a aluminum hub with an SO239 to a 3/8 by 24 connector. The bottom section here is a 4-foot piece, a 1/2-inch pipe. I made this so I could somewhat center load this coil. I did find some research that some hams did, and they've got actual measurements on it where a bottom loaded coil is probably the least efficient way to load an antenna. As you move up, put more mast under the coil and move the coil up, it becomes much more efficient and much more effective. So this got me about 4 foot of radiating element under the coil, and then I use a 9.5-foot extendable whip on top of it. And this, if I could have left this up at my house all the time, I would have, because this antenna is just, it's the bomb. It works amazing. It's quick to set up. It takes me 4 minutes to set it up from start to finish. For radials, I've got 2 bundles of wires. I've got an alligator clip on. There's 6 wires in each bundle. They're 11 foot long, so I can just clip those on, kind of toss them out. And I use the alligator clip, so when I'm at a park or someplace, if there's people nearby, if somebody's, you know, hooks a foot in it, that alligator clip will just pop off. Yes?
What gauge wire are you using for your ground radials?
What gauge wire am I using for the ground radials? It's 18 gauge. I found a really good deal. I think it was on Amazon, 2 500-foot spools of it. It was the silicone jacketed, so it's actually really flexible. So I bought a whole bunch of this stuff. This antenna, I have these quick disconnects. I don't remember the brand, but they're for a CB antenna, but they're just to push and twist. So I have one on the base. I have one on each end of the copper pipe extension. Of course, I have them on the coils, and that's kind of one of the reasons I can have this thing together so quickly. And I don't risk messing up the threads by, you know, as often as I use this thing. I keep grabbing this like I'm going to change it. So magnetic loop, this is mine up here, and that's this one on the screen. Once I found out about mag loops, then I really got excited. This isn't the first one I built. I didn't actually put that one in the presentation, but at home, this was probably the one I used the most from 20 through 10 meters. I built this one with 20 through 10 meters in mind. So the loop diameter is as large as I can make it and still be able to get all of the 10-meter band. The capacitor, this is a vacuum variable capacitor. Those are kind of required if you want to run any kind of power. This one here, is it rated for 100? So this is an air variable capacitor, very large place, very wide spacing. Most capacitors for these, you can only run 10 watts, maybe 20 watts through it. With this one, I found the vacuum variable capacitor. Its range is, I think, 5 to 465 picofarads. So I'm actually able to tune this antenna down to 60 meters. And I've made contacts on all bands between 60 and 10 meters on this antenna. I don't know that we have enough time to go into how they work, and I don't know that I fully understand them myself. I just know how to put them together and make it work. Magic, yes, very much so. If you want to go ahead and flip through the pictures. That's the capacitor and how I attached it up top. I just cut a slit in the copper tubing. This is just 1/2-inch copper tubing, the kind you'd buy in a coil. And little DC geared electric motor with a piece of DOM rod there to kind of electrically separate it from the motor. I still get a little noise when I'm tuning it, but it's not bad. I did put a capacitor. You can kind of see I put a capacitor across the leads on the motor. That really helped knock down the hash when I tune it. The control cable runs down on the inside of the loop, and then I drilled a hole in the bottom of the copper and it pops out there. This is my control cable to tune it. The control box I put together, it's got a pulse width modulation controller in it that I got off of Amazon for about $10. It's a very simple little board. It came with a potentiometer and the rocker switch. It's a 2-position rocker switch. So the way I put it together, I added the little red and green buttons. They're momentary buttons. How I tune this, if I want to go between bands, I turn the potentiometer all the way up, which sends full voltage to the motor, to the DC geared motor. I can then hit the rocker switch. I go this way to go up the bands, so say from 20 to 17, or if I want to go from 20 to 30, I'll hit it the other direction. To tune it, I watch and listen. I watch the waterfall on the SDR or on the radio, depending on which one I'm using, and you listen for the noise. If this is tuned to 20 meters and you're wanting to go to 40, when you're on 40 meters, it's dead silent. There's nothing. As you get closer, the noise will start coming up, your S meter will start coming up, and if you have a waterfall, you'll see that as it's approaching. Tune this a few times and it just kind of becomes intuitive. As it gets closer, I'll turn the rocker switch off, I'll turn the potentiometer way down, and then I'll start using the push buttons. And that really slows the motor down, and on the waterfall, you can just see that peak roll across the waterfall. And as it gets closer to the frequency I want to use, I can stop and just start tapping those buttons. And then I'll just use my cross needle SWR meter to where it's the lowest, and I'm good to go. This has been a really fun antenna. I really like the mag loops because there's so many ways you can put them together. But this has kind of been my workhorse. 100-watt sideband, CW, digital. It takes it all because of that vacuum variable capacitor. So this is painted up all nice and stealthy. It lived underneath my deck. It's nice and round in that picture, but you'll notice it's got kind of a flat spot on the side. Before I had my tactical tie-off on it, wind blew it over, and it landed on its side. So I thought scars are cool, so I didn't want to straighten it out. I just left it as is. There's a little controller. When I first put it together, I just had the push buttons. And the first time I went to change bands from something like 17 down to 40 meters, after about 2 minutes with my finger on the button, I had to let off and rest for a bit. So that's when I threw the rocker switch back in it. I can just click it and leave it be till it gets there. Call this my capacity hat, my high-tech Walmart trash can, to just kind of cover everything up top. So this is another one. This was winter field day. I wasn't able to go out and participate in winter field day, but for some reason I got a wild hair and thought I'm going to build me a little QRP mag loop that's portable and breaks down. And this is what I come up with. It's the capacitors in the bottom box, control knob, the coaxial loop instead of a copper loop. It's LMR 400, and it was some cheap LMR 400 that I found, so it's very stiff, which works great for this purpose. The coupling loop up top there is actually what the coax runs to. It's made out of 12-gauge solid copper wire. I peeled out of some 12-3 household wire and put this together one morning and played winter field day from the house on this. So that's inside the box. The tuning capacitor, it's not nearly as wide of plate spacing as the one behind me, but I can run about 20 watts through this. I've got a Zygu G90. It's a 20-watt HF radio, and I've never had any problems running 20 watts through this. Up here off of this leg, this little thing right there, it's an NE2 neon bulb, and I added that in. The voltage that goes through these capacitors at resonance is pretty incredible, and it's enough to light that neon bulb. So what I can do is I can turn the power down on the radio even to 1 watt, send like a CW carrier or FM, and just kind of tune that thing in, and when that bulb reaches its brightest level, 9 times out of 10, I'm right on. I don't have to retune it from there. So that just kind of made for a quick and easy way to dial it in. I had an extra piece, another 9-foot piece of that LMR 400 left, so I put some PL239 connectors on it, or PL259 connectors on it, and a SO239 barrel, and basically doubled the size of the loop. And I was able to tune it down to 40 meters with that. And even with 40 meters and 5 watts, I was still able to make contacts coast to coast in the U.S. during winter field day. Even in crowded band conditions, I was still making contacts left and right. This one breaks down. Sorry. I've got these couplers here. They're not glued, but those break down into 3 pieces, and I've got a little Amazon, like a travel kit. It's about the size of a sheet of paper, and that all folds up and fits in there real nice. So I had a couple mountain bikes. I was kind of scrapping out, and I was taking them apart, and I got the aluminum wheels off, and I thought, wow, this is a really nice round piece of aluminum. What could I do with this thing? Mag loop. So, God, I really wish the sound would work on this. So yeah, I just, in a few minutes, literally, I threw together a mag loop out of this. It's a 26-inch aluminum bicycle wheel. I cut all the spokes out. I cut about a 1-inch notch out of the top here. I had this small capacitor in a junk box. I put it on, and it would tune to like 15.3 megahertz. And I'm like, well, that's kind of useless. I have a bunch of these old high-voltage Russian doorknob capacitors. So I kind of mixed and matched until I found a combo that would let me tune all of 20 meters. And another one of those BNC to banana plug binding posts down here with some more of that household 12-gauge copper wire for my feed loop, and it worked great. I did have a video on here. Unfortunately, it's not going to play apparently. This was during the Mississippi QSO party weekend, and my first contact on it was the guy in Mississippi. He gave me a 5.8 report, So I, of course, gave him his 5.9 in Colorado and said, I'm running 5 watts on a mag loop antenna made from a 26-inch bicycle wheel. And after that was about a good 6 or 7 seconds of, it was funny. It cracked me up. It really blew his mind too on what I was actually talking to him on. This is that same little wicker table. It's about 2 feet off the ground, sitting underneath my deck on the ground. I've used this on POTA activations too with my little 20-watt Zygu G90. These are both in my backyard, but I did go down to Boyd Lake one day with that and made, I think, 20-some contacts on sideband and a few CW contacts on it. Oh, that was the video. So you can see the wire from my 40-meter in-fed half-wave here, but that's not the antenna in the picture. The antenna is my rain gutter. That vertical section of rain gutter and about 8 foot there at top. I've heard of this being done, so it's another one of those things, okay, I got to try this. And you can go to the next slide. My 9-to-1 Anten right here is just a small wire, short wire running up to the rain gutter. My same 2 bundles of 12 wires at 11 feet that I kind of had scattered out for radials. And believe it or not, this was probably one of the best antennas I had at this house. I know verticals are kind of notorious for being noisy. This one really wasn't. Most of the bands, I think 40, 20, 15, and 10, I could use the internal tuner on the radio, and it found a match very, very quickly. With the external tuner, that wide range MFJ, again, I think I could tune everything but 160. This antenna was amazing. I was really blown away at how my rain gutter performed. I did some whisper testing at 1 watt, compared it to my in-fed half wave, and it was just really interesting to see the difference in the patterns. I'll jump back to the in-fed half wave wire. On its fundamental frequency, on 40 meters, it has a pattern similar to a dipole. As you go up through those harmonic bands, there becomes more lobes and nulls produced till you get to 10 meters. It looks like a bunch of goat heads sticking together. So you can kind of see those when you do some whisper testing. And with this one, it was very much omnidirectional. But to see the distance that I was getting out of this on 1 watt, it was beating the wire. And it was really amazing on how it worked and how simple it is to do this. I just threw this in there. This is how I got all the wires into my shack. If anybody has a sprinkler system, this will look familiar. This is what some of the valves are housed in for a sprinkler system. I just went to Home Depot, found the largest one I could, buried it in the ground behind my shack, and some electrical supplies. The little box runs into the shack. The other piece of PVC runs down and into the box. This was just kind of as I was getting it together. This is an 8-foot ground rod that I drove into it. And eventually all the antennas I had came in through this box and then into the shack. Actually came into the box, into lightning arresters, and then on into the shack. So I did have a receive antenna. It's called the loop on the ground. If you want to go ahead and hit it. That top one, you can see the red lines popping up there. It's 60 feet of wire, 15 feet on each side. And I did this kind of in early spring to where I could lay the wire on the ground, and then I used landscape staples to tack the wire into the ground. And as the grass grew up around it, the wire just completely disappeared. So there's no chance of somebody tripping over it. The lawnmower didn't grab it. The wire terminates into this little box here, and it's a small little transformer as well, impedance transformer. It's one of those little tiny binocular cores, and I think it's about a 9-to-1 ratio. And this is a receive-only antenna. Like I said earlier, on the backside of my fence, maybe 25 feet on the backside of my fence was those high-tension power lines running through severance. So the noise on 80 meters was horrendous, and 160 was like 40 over for my noise floor. This antenna, the noise floor almost completely drops, and the signal drops. If there's somebody on 80 meters, I'm getting it at an S9. I might get them at an S4 on this thing, but I have no noise. So they sound just incredibly crystal clear. So this really helped me on 80 meters, and I got more active on 80 meters once I put this receive-only antenna in. So this is the picture of the back of my house. The only antenna I don't have up when I took this picture is that mag loop. I had it inside doing something to it. But in this picture, there's 6 antennas up when I took this picture. I had 4 HF antennas and 2 UHF VHF antennas. You go ahead and hit it. So there's the 40 meter in-fed half wave, the rain gutter there in the blue, the 6 meter dipole under the deck. That's where the mag loop sit. Actually, where the mag loop is, I had put a piece of lattice there also, so it just completely disappeared. The next one, there's the little 2 meter dipole here that I swung out from the post, and then that arrow open stub J-pole was right there also. And oh yeah, the loop on the ground receive antenna. So in September, my wife and I filed for divorce. I got me an apartment up in Wellington, and I wasn't going to be denied radio time, so I took my mag loop, painted it white so it looked a little better, matched the decor a little better, and I worked all across the country, and during some contests, I was able to work sideband NCWDX into Europe on this from inside my apartment. It lived in my bedroom. When I wanted to play radio, I just unrolled the control cable and hook up a piece of coax, and I had the radio in the living room. So even in the apartment, it worked very well. It was a little bit noisier considering being in the apartment building, but not so much that it kept me off the air. I also took that 9-to-1 transformer. It's been used a lot. It sat here on the floor. I just run a piece of wire up the wall and along the top edge of the ceiling over into the kitchen. It was a 41-foot wire. And then I ran a counterpoise wire, a 16-foot. I just tucked underneath the baseboard trim. This is where the radio was set up here in the living room. And it worked well. I had, of course, the tuner on the radio would get a match on most bands, 40 meters and up. With the 41-foot wire, everything worked fine. I thought, well, if 41 is good, 58 must be better. So I had an extension on it to go to 58, and every time I keyed the radio up with anything over 10 watts, I reset my Wi-Fi router. So I took the extension off and went back to 41 foot, and it worked well. Okay. That same little roll-up J-pole that I had dressed up as a flower, that's this one here. I just Velcroed it to a tripod and set it behind my recliner, and that's what I had hooked up to my UHF VHF radio. So, like I said, I just bought a house in Nunn just a few weeks ago, so I'm not in an HOA anymore. So my second purchased HF antenna, the only second HF antenna I've ever purchased, I've now got a Hustler 5-band vertical in the backyard, and I've added on, I made some additions for 12 meters and 17 meters that I put on this antenna. So I still use the mag loop. It's right outside the shack, and I use it on the work bands. Even though I just put the additions onto this antenna for 17 and 12, I just kind of like using this one because it's fun to use. That's it. Any questions from anybody?
This presentation was brought to you by the Northern Colorado Amateur Radio Club. For more information, visit our website, ncarc.net. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe.